I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. You know, I've noticed that over the last, year, maybe a year and a half, I've had a lot of people ask to be on the show who wanted to talk about this thing called AI. And no doubt, because it's the great disruptor. It's changing the way we lead. It's changing the way we work. It's changing our productivity, our efficiency, even our own company. We're seeing great strides in efficiency because of AI. And so because of that, I wanted to tell you that this particular episode, yes, is about AI, but this particular person that I'm going to interview and share with you has a view about one of the most difficult parts of leadership, which is giving and receiving feedback, that AI is now able to help really advance and to really move us forward in a powerful way. So on that note, with respect to AI, I did ask ChatGPT to take all of the entire transcript of my interview with this gentleman and to create a nice introduction. And so here we go. Here is the introduction created by ChatGPT for my interview. Imagine a world where the most difficult, emotional, and impactful conversations in the workplace, that giving and receiving feedback, are revolutionized by artificial intelligence. What if the toughest parts of leadership, like guiding performance or fostering trust, could be amplified not by a human, but by a machine? This isn't science fiction. It's happening right now. And my guest today, Ghatak, is on the cutting edge of this transformation. As the leader of OnLoop, JJ saw firsthand the limitations of traditional management tools during his time at Uber, where rapid team expansion clashed with outdated feedback systems. And frustrated by these challenges, JJ sought to bridge the gap between human intuition and machine precision. And the result, an AI-driven approach that transforms raw observations into structured, actionable feedback that's reshaping the way we lead. In this conversation, we'll unpack why humans struggle with feedback and how AI shapes or steps in to make it better, and what it means for leadership, trust, and the future of work. We'll explore the promise and the ethical implications of using AI to enhance human connection in a way that we've never seen before. So buckle up, because this conversation will change the way you think about leadership, feedback, and what it means to be a human in the age of AI. JJ Ghatak on the Leadovation podcast. Jay, great to have you on the show. Know you're coming from beautiful Singapore, place that I always wanted to visit. Have only flown over it many a time. And you're right, it's probably one of the more beautiful, well-run countries that we have. But you are a guy that I've been very much wanting to talk to because of your, not just because of AI, but because you have a certain way in which to provide leaders and team members feedback using AI. So let's start there. Tell me, what about that do you know? And ultimately, I'd love to hear how we might be able to access this.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Dean, for having me. My company OnLoop was really born from personal pain. And right before starting the company, I'd spent close to 4 years at a company called Uber, in a variety of regional and global roles, and sort of I saw Uber through a time of pretty rapid growth of sort of large expanding teams, and I just felt like the tools that we gave managers and leaders to run their teams were abysmal, right? Like the tools to do project management and communication and all of those things got better, but when it came to things like goals and feedback, etc., we we were still living in the 1980s, and that needed to change. This was sort of at the beginning of COVID, so just around early 2020. It was also the same time that GPT-3 came out. So
Mm.
obviously everybody's heard of ChatGPT, which came out in November of 2022. But in August of 2019, a predecessor of ChatGPT came out that was quite mind blowing. And at that time, only a small handful of people in Silicon Valley had their hands on it. We actually had to apply to get into a private beta with OpenAI to work on their technology. And really, what sort of language transformers do is just able to add structure to unstructured data, right? And if you think about what feedback is a particular style and approach to communicating your observation to someone else or to yourself in a way that motivates a change in behavior. But giving and receiving good feedback is a deeply unnatural act. And I think we've been largely unsuccessful at getting people to do it well at scale is because people just aren't good at it.
Why do you
What
think
people
that is? If you could just stop for a second, you made say a comment there that I thought was pretty interesting that we're just not good at it. Why do you think that? Because I could imagine some people might say, "Hey, I'm pretty good at giving feedback."
hmm,
Why do you think that is not a skill that we're good at? Human to
what
human.
people what people are good at is making observation, right?
Mm.
So I can spend an hour with you and I can have a set of observations, right? So Dean is high energy, he has curiosity around sort of what other people's needs are, etc., right? But that's an observation, that's not feedback. It's feedback when it's structured a particular way, um, often a framework that you're probably familiar with called SBI, which is situation, behavior, impact, whereby you take those observations and then structure it in a way to be direct and kind with regards to how that gets delivered. And that applies to both sort of strengths based or reinforcement feedback or constructive feedback. And a lot of people don't realize there are two types of feedback. But AI is sort of unbiased and sort of unbothered by emotion, whereby it can take a set of observations and write it in a form that's the most impactful to the recipient. And which is why we believe that humans are great at making observations and AI is very good at generating feedback. And actually, there's now economist articles and research that has been done to show that AI writes better feedback than 91% of humans. And sure, there might be a set of super managers who are better at it than humans are. I'm sorry, than AI is, and that's fantastic, right? In the same way that like there are people who can memorize phone numbers, right? So they might be able to memorize 400 phone numbers, but for mere mortals, we have an address book that have phone numbers saved in it, right? And I look at sort of AI and feedback similarly. Yes, there'll be certain managers that will get really good at it, but for the vast majority of managers, they are better served taking raw observations and then using AI to convert them into feedback.
Do human beings accept the feedback from AI in the same way that it may receive the feedback, or you might call it observations from a human being? Is it easier to get this information from
Yeah,
some sort of technology versus a live human being who's sitting across with a cup of coffee in their hand?
yeah. So research shows that people receive the feedback better when they don't know who wrote it,
Mm.
and they receive the feedback worse if they think AI wrote it, right? Which is why it is always important in any AI system to have a workflow that uses AI where it matters and people where it matters. And
So
so,
do you then trick people into thinking that they are getting feedback from a human being when in fact it's not? It's actually a piece of technology.
Well, so you're using AI to get people to do better, right? Think about it as parking sensors and parking cameras on your car, right? So you're still parking the car, but the camera is making sure you don't hit the curb, right? So in our product, right, if you spew a set of observations, be it from an individual or 360, we're able to then break that down into specific pieces of celebrate or improve feedback, rewrite it as a situation behavior impact structure, and then send it back to the person who's the author, right? And then they can then use it to prep for a difficult conversation. They can then make edits and send over celebrates, which we always recommend people do right away, and save improves for more in-person conversations. They can disregard it and rewrite it. It's really up to them. And what we've seen in organizations is that once people use our AI enhancer for a while, they actually get better at it because now they know what good looks like, right? Like I tell people I can now park better because of those goddamn cameras. Because I now know how near or far I am from the curb. But we've put people through a couple of days of training and then expect that what they learned in the room they'll be able to then deliver on day in day out when they're outside the room. And that's just unrealistic. And
So
and and we need to give people the aids to do better when it matters, not just in rooms. Training's great, but
yeah.
I would argue that feedback training has not delivered quite in the same way on its promise because people don't have the right aids at the right time. And when you combine feedback training with the right tooling, the impact that has is significantly greater.
All right. So JJ, walk me through this. I get the general concept, but I don't know the application of it.
Yeah,
Um, how does the AI tool
yeah,
ingest the information in order
yeah.
to provide the feedback? What does that workflow look like?
Yeah, so we have a standalone mobile and desktop app, but we also have integrations into Microsoft Teams, and into also popular chat applications like WhatsApp that allows a person to provide observations, and we like calling it observations. That's called a capture on you or a team member into the system, right? And then what the system does is that it looks for specificity of feedback. So often, people have heard of the feedback sandwich and sort of people trying to like mix, constructive feedback with strength based feedback, and we think sort of breaking them out is very important. So if someone sort of gives us a 3 minute sort of unstructured dialogue or monologue on a person, we're able to then extract out, okay, out of this what are the discrete pieces of feedback that's actually embedded in it. We're then able to take each of those sort of pieces and rewrite that out, and we use a situation behavior impact structure to write good feedback. People can use large language models to apply other frameworks to that too. And then we extract the key behaviors or company values or competencies that match that particular feedback, right? Because often where organizations really struggle is sort of understanding whether people are living their values or what skills they have. But where that data is really hidden is in feedback observations. And then we sort of over time see what behaviors come up most often for a person, either in the celebrate or the improve category. And then when it comes time for more formal reviews, we actually stitch all of that together into what we call a prism summary. And we
Hmm.
were the first company in the world to automate performance reviews, which is why my shirt says "You weren't born to write performance reviews." And we sort of do that both for an individual and a manager, which then becomes the basis of having the conversation at the end of a quarter or at the end of 6 months. And so we shift all of the energy away from, because unfortunately people have hated feedback because they sort of make it synonymous with writing performance reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why goals and feedback has been hated in organizations, because the implementation of it is typically a cumbersome, time consuming chore that nobody wants to do. And so now when we sort of split that up, we can get people to do what they're good at, which is making unstructured observations, and then use AI to do all of the reporting and the writing and the paperwork around it.
Okay, so I can see just based on what you've said how this would work in the written form. You're in
Yeah,
a meeting. I'm assuming that you have maybe some sort of voice to text translation. This
yeah,
is what JJ said, this is what Dean said. We can go through this app process and be able to link it to competencies and behaviors, provide some feedback. Hey, Dean, what you said in this particular situation was or was not aligned to what we would hope for a manager of your level, whatever it might be. But what
yeah,
about nonverbal communication, which is, of course,
yeah.
as you know, I can't help but think that you know this. Most of our communication is not through the spoken word or the written word. It's through, the gestures, the eye looking away or what have you. Does it capture any of that?
Well, so it captures what a person's putting in as an observation, right? So if I'm making an observation on Dean, right, I can I can sort of talk about both Dean's verbal and nonverbal communication. I thought where you were taking that question is, look, I understand that it's able to really assist with feedback in written form. How do you think about difficult conversations, and what do you do real time in a difficult conversation? um and i
So,
and i and
no, but
sorry, go on.
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
and
Sorry.
and I,
You're getting
and I,
me
and I
excited here.
and I think that's a place today where AI isn't as effective, but I think that will evolve.
Okay,
And I
so
and
so
I,
the
I think that
input
will change over time.
so the input mechanism is obviously voice to text. Essentially we're bringing in the written word and what's being said and so forth. But it's also the other input into this
Yeah,
are the observations of live human beings,
correct, correct,
which is subjective to that person's interpretation.
correct, 100%.
JJ looked away, he must not like me. JJ looked away, he must be thinking. Two different interpretations, same thing,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So
Yeah.
the data is only the output is only be as good as the data coming in.
Yeah, so actually, if you put that observation in, we will probably rip out the fact that you said JJ must not like me, and so we will rewrite that out to say it has often been observed that in conversations you can tend to look away, which can create the perception that you may not like the other person.
But what
And
if I was looking away because I was thinking about something,
sure,
not that I was
but
disengaged?
that's
How does
but
how do we
but that's
then
but that's my
alter for
point.
that?
That's my point. So the way you communicate that feedback is by saying, look, when you look away, it can create a perception that you don't like the other person. So
Okay.
maintaining eye contact becomes critical in conversations to create a trusted connection with the other person. Right? Like
Okay.
like that's how that would get rewritten to get delivered, which is the right way to communicate feedback, because you talk about your behavior and the potential impact of that behavior versus
Right.
making a judgment or accusation about the person, like, you know you didn't look at me, therefore you must not like me.
Could you follow up with that in this model that you're describing, a back end part of the feedback, which is, all right, we start off what we observed. This could be perceived as people don't feel well liked by you. Is there a request or a desired behavior that could then be on the back end of that front end feedback?
Yeah, so the way our entire framework works, and actually we came up with a 5-layer framework of what actually drives productivity in the workplace. And at the base of it is someone's energy and motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Above that is clarity around a person's goals, and we define goals as targets, projects, and skills. Above that is clarity around superpowers and blind spots that's derived from feedback. And then the last is ongoing learning and growth. And essentially, it's every manager's job to manage that hierarchically for every team member. And so when it comes to desired behavior, so if there is a piece of feedback around, maintaining eye contact, right, as in conversations as a skill, if you believe or your manager believes that is important enough, that can become a skill goal that gets created for you. And then you can track feedback against that skill goal over time to see whether you're actually getting better at it or not. And you can request people for feedback on that specific skill goal so that you're actually soliciting feedback with regard to your desire to get better at that domain. And so if you don't, and so the forward looking part is how you think about skills and whether the intelligence or the insight generating from feedback sort of feeds into how you think about getting better at upskilling.
So it still could be, even if the feedback is right on and very, very accurate, the individual still might decide not to do anything about it.
That's
The,
correct.
the autonomy, uh, the free will is still on
Yeah.
the receiving end. You might go, hey, thanks a lot, appreciate it. I'm still going to do what I'm doing.
Well, and that's because, and there's often good reason for that. And actually, if you think about our model, people often gravitate to improve feedback, but actually, working on your shortcomings, it does not become relevant until there are certain things that are in place, like you have clarity around your goals, you're motivated, you know where your strengths are, and there's a ton of research that strengths-based reinforcement feedback is significantly more important than constructive feedback. And
Yeah.
as you get older in your career, you're far better off doubling down what you're good at, and then mitigating the things that you're not great at, versus trying to get better at the things you're not good at, right? And that sort of feeds into how we think about productivity. But I think awareness of where your blind spots might be, that's why we call it blind spots and not criticism or shortcomings or weaknesses. They are blind spots get discovered through feedback. And yes, I'm not the world's most organized person, and I've come to accept that, and that's okay. But I am far better at building serendipitous relationships with a wide diversity of people better than most other human beings. And that's where I should focus on, because if I double down on that, I will continue to leverage that superpower. If I spend all day trying to instill discipline into my life, that's probably not going to serve me best.
Mm-hmm.
And that applies to all people. Therefore, getting clarity around superpowers is more important than getting clarity around blind spots. And what we see happening typically in organizations is that people are very non-specific around the celebratory feedback. They'll be like, "Oh, you're doing a great job. Like, keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing." And when you get something wrong, people will get pedantic around the specificity of what went wrong and what you can do better about it. And
100%.
that
Yeah.
is and that
Yeah.
and that is the opposite of what should be happening in organizations. And the specificity around things that are going well are more important than the specificity around what is not going well.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. You're absolutely right. One book that's coming to mind as you're talking, JJ, is one called The Extraordinary Leader, where they were doing a lot of research and focusing on exactly what you just said. So those of you who are listening in, pick up that book. It's good. You said something early on that I want to come back to,
Yeah,
which you said, if I may remember correctly, that people receive feedback better from a human being than they do from basically a bot or some sort of technology.
yeah,
Um, I'm very aware of that. I mean, I'm very aware. Like, I write articles. We have people on our marketing team that write stuff, and I have to sometimes go back and put my own voice into it because it doesn't sound like me. It doesn't sound like
yeah,
a human being. It sounds like ChatGPT, who happened to be given a few prompts. Right?
yeah,
We do a lot of 360s as well. A lot of data, a lot of written words. We use ChatGPT as a way to summarizing things, but I still got to come back and make it human. So, how do you then delivered this feedback, which is through obviously technology, in a way that people can accept it if they also know that it's coming through, you know, um, some sort of, bot or check technology?
Yeah. So the reason why ChatGPT will not take over the world, but AI will take over the world, is that generic technology is generic, right? So yes, if you ask ChatGPT to reframe a piece of observation as feedback, it will sound robotic. But there is now technology that can take publicly available information on how Dean talks, how Dean writes, and then write and talk exactly how Dean would. And we haven't done this yet, but theoretically, you could take people's past reviews, right? So I'm a manager. We can we a potential future version of OnLoop could ingest 20 reviews that I've written on other people. And then whenever I have an observation, it would then use my tone of voice and my language to read it that out.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then it sounds it is exactly delivered the way Dean does, because that is also language training, right? So yes, Chat GPT can't do that. But if you actually create a custom GPT out of Chat GPT, and you're able to, people use the word training loosely, but you're able to create what's called a RAG of just your content, it will then create outcomes that are much similar to your content versus the body of the entire internet. The reason why it doesn't sound like you is because it's trying to sound like the internet,
Hmm.
and the internet may not sound like you, but you can constrain the model to only write in a tone based on content that's already written by you. And then you can make it much more lifelike. And actually, one of the biggest issues that comes in the way of good feedback, and when we train managers, we talk about this, is it's your emotion as the person who's delivering that feedback. Whether you're agitated, whether you're scared, whatever it is, but that's actually completely meaningless to the delivery of the feedback. But what AI,
Hmm.
like what is beautiful about AI is that it is not emotional, and therefore it can always be empathetic. Because humans are
Hmm.
emotional, their own emotions come in the way of them being empathetic. Because it is typically them getting triggered negatively around something that prevents them from being fully there for the other person, which is why in the future, AI therapists will surpass a vast majority of human therapists, because AI listens to you without having their own thoughts and feelings going on in their heads. They're very focused on you. The biggest problem with humans is that they're largely focused on themselves, and they hear others, or they interact with others through a lens of what's happening for themselves. And when you're a really good listener or a really good manager, you're able to tune that out, and you're able to fully focus on the other person, which AI can automatically do because it doesn't have its own things to work through, or emotions to work through.
Totally
um
get it. But the flip side, JJ, is that the I get it. The individual is triggered. They have emotions. It holds them back from being empathetic. 100% agree with you. You got me at hello. Fine. But the flip side is that the emotional connection that somebody has because they are engaged, they're excited, they're passionate, they're in love with what's being said to them is something that is also being felt by the receiver, which I can't help
sure.
but think that AI is going to be able to convey in the same way, unless it's using certain language patterns that trigger in us, our subconscious or our conscious minds, that says, "Oh, this person is this AI, this robot, if you will, if we get really expand the idea beyond what you're talking about, is
Sure.
behaving in a way that reminds me of what a human being behaves as." So,
Actually, data proves you wrong, because the the sort of complete explosion of AI boyfriend and girlfriend applications globally is nuts at the moment. And typically, where people are landing is, look, a real human connection will always trump a real AI connection. But a real AI connection is significantly better than people believing they're not cared for and lonely. and and AI will cure the loneliness pandemic globally better than any human effort that has existed so far.
That's a
And
profound statement, my friend.
and people are finding companionship in AI right now every single day.
So tell me
Now,
more about that. We're shifting gears a little bit, but say more about uh, this evolution that you're describing.
yeah, so a core use case is a company called Candy.ai, and they've been
Candy.
doing Candy.ai, and they've been doing incredibly well. And what they do is they create AI boyfriends and girlfriends. And actually, one of the core use cases that they're seeing is people who've lost a loved one and are not yet ready to build a connection with another human.
Hmm.
And they turn to AI for companionship because it feels like a safer space where they don't have to worry about, are they fully ready, are they letting someone else down, how are they showing up, and they can be themselves and have companionship through, yes, a machine that talks back to them and has characteristics of a human being without the consciousness of a human being,
So is the
right?
point though? I mean, I can only imagine from a business model perspective, you want to continue, you want to make things sticky, you want to continue the relationship with the client.
Yeah,
Are you saying that you said something earlier that for those who have lost somebody, they don't feel ready for
yeah,
whatever reason to have a real human connection? Is the
yeah,
point to get that person through AI companionship to be able to transition to a human to human relationship? Or are there businesses out there that says, well, that's not really our model. Our
yeah,
job is to create boyfriend, girlfriend, companionship, however you want to call it. You even
yeah,
go into the porn industry, right? This is all sorts of applications of this, right?
totally.
That that completely takes the human out of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a choice, right? And in the future, I think there'll be questions like, if I'm in a marriage and I am once in a while talking to an AI avatar about things that maybe I don't have the comfort or courage to talk to my partner to, is that okay or not okay,
What do
right?
you think?
And I don't know. I don't feel a void in my relationship to need to do that, but I can see situations where people can bring up things that they don't yet feel comfortable with their partner and test it out with an AI, right? Like people do mock interviews or mock conversations or other things. So, bring it up with the AI avatar first and see how the AI avatar reacts.
But there's also to the this is extraordinarily fascinating. So I remember hearing a therapist once say that betrayal for a typical male female you know relationship is that the female feels threatened, no, the male feels threatened when his partner has had a sexual relationship with something else. That's the
Yes.
betrayal. The
Yeah.
female in this equation feels betrayed when the husband, the boyfriend, the male has an emotional connection with somebody else. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm thinking in your dynamic that you described that the husband ends up having an emotional connection with his avatar, and that's paramount to betrayal for the female, even
Yeah.
though we know it's not a real human to human interaction.
Yeah. And I've heard of that sort of generalization before. I think it's a gross generalization that's not always true. But I know that generalization exists. Look, I as an individual am very much focused on how do humans build trusted connections with other humans, because I think
That's your
that
mission.
as and that's a core part of what I do and why I do what I do in life. However, and that's because I believe that is the piece that is deeply uniquely human, right? And I think as a species, what AI is going to do is really test the boundaries of what's human and what's not. So what
Correct.
is replicable and what's not. However, I also feel incredibly privileged that I have very deep, long-lasting connections with a lot of human beings, and I know that's not the case for everybody, right? And if you think about gamers, for instance, and people who spend hours playing computer games all day. In many ways, that's an escape from a real world where they may not connect, right?
True.
And that world might be taking them further away from how real human connection is. But if AI can simulate that, we might be able to bring those people back into the real world where they focus on forming trusted real relationships, and we don't start living in Ready Player One. And so
Well, it
and so so I think where I get triggered is when people start thinking about humans and AI as dichotomous systems that are competing with each other versus really embracing saying, look, this is here and it's going to happen. And we should try and embed it in as much of our life as we can and then see what else remains. And then that's going to give us direction of where to go to, because we now live in a world where in our day and age, electricity just got invented. And in 50 years, AI will get so embedded in our lives the way electricity is, they don't even think about it. When you turn the fan on, you're not like, oh, this is a electric appliance. You just fucking put the fan on. Right? Like, and so this obsession around everything's an AI company will go away because like everything will be AI. Right? Like, because it'll become part of the infrastructure on how we live. Like this podcast recording will fundamentally change when it is immersive AI running this conversation. And that will make the conversation much richer because it will increase the foundational insight that gets created. Today, you don't know a lot about me, I don't know a lot about you, but we can fundamentally change that so that when we have a podcast conversation, it might feel like we've known each other for 10 years.
Hmm.
And that would then lead to a richer interaction than we can have today because it's AI powered.
Well, I like the idea of just from my own value system that your values are around creating stronger human connections. And I also acknowledge the fact that we do have AI. It's not going away. It's only going to continue. And I also, on the third part, do believe that we are now being forced to define what it means to be human, and moralistically, strategically, from a business model perspective, what society wants to do. We now all of a sudden have to define that,
Yeah,
and do
yeah.
you monitor that? Do you legislate for that? Do you limit that? All these other things that get involved. I don't know, but it is here, and it's whether we like it or not. We are talking about it a lot.
Look, if you think about, the Rust Belt of the US and why it got left behind is because factories in China just got a whole lot better,
Yep.
right? And which is why you've had the political movement that you've had in the US.
Yep.
There'll be similar
In part.
implications in part, right?
Yep.
There'll be similar implications with AI. And
True.
and it will leave a lot of people behind. Now, you can protect on that through legislation, right? Or you sort of let a globalized meritocratic world see where it goes. And I think we're going into an era where the world is getting more protectionist. And talking about
Mhm.
100% tariffs on goods is a way to artificially prop up economies that are worse at producing goods than other economies are. And people might do the same with AI, right? And sort of, and it's starting to happen where every country believes it needs to have their own foundational models because this might become economic warfare between nations. And
So
so,
how is it? What's it like in Singapore? Is this particular technology they're talking about? I don't know whether we haven't had a lot of time to chat before we started this conversation. I don't know who your clients are at this point, but I'd be curious. But are you seeing that this is being? I don't know. Is there a regional or a country acceptance level? I don't know whether you spent a lot of time in the U.S. lately or not, but is this going over better in your hometown of Singapore than you think it might over here? What's your sense about it and the
so there's
regional
a
differences?
so there's a BCG maturity index around national readiness for AI that just got published.
Hmm.
It's a 2 week old report.
Okay, I'll look
Um,
for it.
and sort of and again, it's BCG's assessment of where various nations is. I think Singapore is number 2 or number 3 on that list globally.
Hmm.
And that's because we as a nation have made the decision that we would rather push this to the boundary and risk misuse versus undertake the risk of misuse.
Hmm.
And that's a very clear national decision that's been communicated by our Minister of Digital Development Industry, Josephine Teo, in various conferences.
Okay.
And we are progressively working with and sort of our business is a combination of Singapore, US, and the UAE, and those are the three sort of geographies we focus on at the moment. And more, we're getting involved with some of the largest conglomerates, asset managers in Singapore to transform their businesses with AI. And as the world of AI moves from invention to application, and the US is fundamentally better at inventive breakthroughs. There's no country in the world that rivals the US in inventive technological breakthroughs. But what countries around the world, especially China, are able to do is take those inventive breakthroughs and build applications much quicker because they can move faster after that. And what's happening with AI is we're going to have this continuous exploration exploitation sort of dichotomy between new inventions coming out and then people will take a run with it. So there's a model that got built in China. I think it's called um, it's not DeepMind. The name escapes me, but they built a large language model that competes with OpenAI and beats them on a bunch of tests by spending $8 million.
Hmm.
And that's because once the base level inventions have been made, the ability to then get that to an application level gets a lot more cheaper and scalable. And I think as a country like Singapore, I think we're humble that we won't yet create foundational breakthroughs at the foundational technology level, but we will probably build applications and approaches that are world's first and globally unique.
Understood. So
and
then who's your,
and
I was going to ask, who's your client? What kind of clients do you work with?
we sort of do well with two sorts of companies. One is growing technology companies and marketing agencies that are helmed by a leader that understands that accountability and development are not at odds in organizations, right? And that productivity and ROI from your people is a fundamental investment into who they are, right? And then the second is larger corporations that are trying to bring AI into their organizations at a holistic level.
Hmm.
And there we think about productivity as a combination of our approaches around sort of human productivity, but also thinking about how you build a digital workforce. And that's something we've been starting to look at in the last 6 to 12 months is how do we help businesses obviously make the most out of the people they have, but also start augmenting those people with digital workers. Uh, and
Fascinating.
and and that's how we think about the future of productivity.
Great. Well, this is really fascinating way to finish my day, and you're just starting yours. I mean, you got me thinking about a lot of different things. What can or how can people follow you, and what are you up to next?
Yeah, so I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I'm not a Twitter person. I'm a LinkedIn person, and so
Yeah.
and so if you look for JJ or Projjal, Ghatak or OnLoop, it's easy to find me. I read everything that comes in my mailbox. I don't always respond, but I read everything, and so I love hearing from folks. And if it's inspired something for you, and I will often reply back if sort of it's the right message. I think 2025 is a super exciting time. I think as a company, we really started with feedback and reviews and thinking about sort of that aspect of human productivity. But I think in the last 4 or 5 years, we take a much more holistic lens at productivity, and so we're quite excited on how we can start transforming large businesses that have lived in a, let's call it, non-AI SaaS world, and sort of propel them into an AI native world. So if had they never bought SAP, Workday, Salesforce, etc., what would they look like today, right? And I think a lot of companies are bogged down by the baggage of buying software that don't serve them quite the right way. And we sort of think about that a lot. The second is that we're very excited about the Middle East, especially UAE and Saudi, and sort of their desire to really invest in global technology and really sort of be part of that movement. They sort of see themselves often as providers of capital versus sort of building the capabilities. So I'll be spending quite a bit of time in Abu Dhabi and the UAE in the first half of this year.
Hmm.
And I think the AI pieces can be scary for a lot of people, but in my lifetime, I've never seen so much opportunity ahead of us. And I think the next 5 or 10 years, I think we'll see a lot of innovation and growth, and frankly, I'm very excited.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, JJ, thank you so much for these insights. It's got me thinking, and I'm sure it's got a lot of people thinking about how we can continue to use AI, and you've got some great ideas.
Thank you. It was good to meet you, Dean, and hopefully we'll chat again.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newlund. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.